When thinking about how people cope with illness, it's helpful to look at the types of supports that are available and perhaps unavailable to them. So, we all engage in supportive relationships. These are friendships. So, in any kind of relationship, reciprocity is often an issue. Reciprocity refers to in a relationship when each person generally gives and receives at equal levels. Think about a friendship you've had in the past where you felt that you were always giving and never receiving. It probably didn't feel great. But the opposite can also hold true. When you feel like your friend is always taking care of you and you never get a chance to return the favor, you can also feel unhappy in the friendship. So, this can really be the case when someone's ill as well. When you're sick, you often find that everyone is taking care of you, but it's not a great feeling. People can feel over benefited. And this is when they are constantly receiving support, but never have the opportunity to return the favor. It can lead to feelings of inadequacy, helplessness, and demoralization. Similarly, caregivers can often feel overburdened by this dynamic, and they don't necessarily feel that there's a safe space in society to discuss those feelings. So they're left spinning with the emotions on their own. And this in turn can lead to burnout. So, this may be one of the reasons that social support groups, both on and offline, are so popular because they give people a space to say things to other people who understand, people who are going through the same things, and without having to worry about those interpersonal dynamics that are part of longstanding friendships. So, we can think about different types of support networks. And there are three types that scholars talk about: strong tie networks, weak tie networks, and unbounded networks. So let's look at each. Strong tie networks, what are they? Well, they're usually family and friends, close networks with long histories. So these are the people, you've known a really long time. And positives of these networks are, these people are often best placed to provide physical and emotional care. And that's due to proximity and to history. But there are real negatives to relying on these networks as well. As we mentioned, the person who's ill can feel over benefited, and caregivers can feel burned out. There are other issues as well. Sometimes we don't want close family and friends to know issues that are going on with us, particularly when stigma's attached. So think about alcoholism, drug addiction, mental illness, sexually transmitted infections. All of these can be things that it's difficult to discuss with people with whom you have close ties, depending on those people's beliefs and your own feelings of shame or embarrassment. So, what are other networks? Weak tie networks. Well, these are usually between people who communicate frequently, but not in an intimate way. So, think about neighbors, service providers, internet groups, support groups, church or community groups. Some of the benefits of these kinds of relationships is they offer diverse points of view. Perhaps some of them have knowledge about the particular illness you have. And there's less emotional attachment. So there's more willingness to have honest conversations about weighted topics. You don't have to worry about sparing the feelings of people in a weak tie network, unlike with family and friends. So there's also less conflict over those role obligations. But there are negatives as well. Because these are weak ties, they might not be quite as reliable. And that's partly due to, less history being there. But in general, the positives of these weak tie networks seem to outweigh the negatives. Now, there's a subset of weak tie networks that's also hugely important. And these are support groups. Prior to the pandemic, you had over 25 million Americans using them for help with illness. What makes these groups so popular? Well, people have difficulty communicating about illness in traditional networks. But support groups provide something else because the people there, they have similar experiences. There are aspects of illness that people who've had the illness are best placed to understand. So, whether it's about the symptoms of the illness, the side effects of treatments, or the impact of the illness on relationships in people's lives, people in support groups can offer firsthand experience about this. The other thing is that when people get sick, illness can make people feel alienated from their old social networks. And so instead of feeling isolated, being in a support group allows you to interact with other people who are comfortable talking about this. Because particularly in American society, illness makes people uncomfortable. It reminds them of their own mortality. And the thing is that a surprising number of friends may avoid contact or engage in communication that minimizes feelings and conditions of the person suffering from the illness. So this is a great place to connect without all of that stigma around illness. Not even necessarily an illness that we think of as having stigma, but just illness itself sometimes in American culture can be coded as weakness. Another element, as we mentioned, is this reciprocity. So a major benefit of the groups is the members engage in reciprocity. They're able to support each other. In strong tie networks, the patient is always getting help, but within support groups, they can be the source of help because the very illness that means that other people support them outside of their lives means that they have information that they can provide to others. And this ability to help other people reduces feelings of powerlessness and increases feelings of self-worth. One major way that people use the groups is actually through narrative, by telling stories. And it's through these stories that they're able to give and gain help. The narrative format is often more credible to people than straightforward information. As a format, people can digest it more easily. And in addition, the use of narrative can help people structure events for themselves. So telling that story provides a framework. It provides a narrative structure so that you have kind of an order imposed on chaos. That can be really powerful. But there are negatives. It's not all good. One thing to remember is that because these groups are in person, they've been less accessible to those with disabilities, people who may not be able to attend physically, or those for whom mental health challenges like anxiety or phobias make it difficult to attend in-person events. But there are other barriers as well regarding race. It's difficult to obtain accurate demographic information about groups due to confidentiality. But in general, support groups have tended to be overwhelmingly white, middle class, and well-educated. And that may mean that these spaces aren't welcome to everyone. Navigating racism when coping with illness is an added stress, and it makes these places less welcoming and therefore less helpful to people. So some of this may be changing with internet support groups. Certainly, the proliferation of these groups has changed the dynamic of health communication and support groups. When we look at internet support groups, scholars have suggested that we should think of them as unbounded networks because, unlike in face to face interactions, people aren't bounded by time or geographic restrictions. They also qualify as weak tie networks. Online groups can be especially helpful for people with social phobias, reduced mobility, or for those for whom race, age, gender, and appearance may be barriers to forming relationships with others in dealing with the same health issues. Because of those reduced visual cues, people are able to engage in interpersonal discussion with less interpersonal risk. Another benefit, by the way, is that because people can go online at any point during the day or night, um, you're not bound by the time of meetings. And so people are able to get support when they're in crisis if crisis happens to be at 3 in the morning. Something else scholars note is that people tend to form really intense relationships online, what they've called hyper-personal interactions. The idea is that people put out the best possible image of themselves in these communications, which allows their communication partner to idealize them. And this happens in a feedback loop. The relationship is hyper personal and more intense than offline communication. That is, all of those relationships are complicated by external realities, environments, and history. So we can see this happening in support groups as well as online communication in general.